Do you like to make a lot of currency? Do you like to go fast? Then I have the strategy for you. Hi, it's Larold, and I'm going to talk about how to run Maven Guardian rotas with Deli mirrors, and how you can make anywhere from 20 to 30 divines per hour doing this surprisingly easy farm setup. It is both easier and more profitable than a lot of tier 17 farm strats, while also being a lot cheaper. But before I get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, so this is sort of an updated version of the first video we ever made on this channel. At the time, Maven rotations were a little different since you had to actually have a physical invitation. That is a bit of quality of life that was added in the Necropolis League, and it was something I was a little worried about. Really, the removal of that, and then the removal of sextants just in general, but specifically the sextant that made it so that bosses would drop Harbinger shards. Kind of made me a little worried that this strategy was like completely dead, and I hadn't really figured out the perfect way to kind of triangulate back to getting something that was a pretty appropriate approximation of what that strategy felt like to do, but I have found it now. At the core of this strategy, it really is about zooming super fast and casting kind of a wide net. We're really not trying to dive super deep. We're just trying to just scoop up as much as we can off the surface level of everything that we're doing here. So in terms of what I think makes this strategy special, it's super duper cheap to do now. This is something that is different from the way that it was before, where in the past, I didn't use any Scarabs, I used only one Sextant, I did everything I could to cut costs, but at the end of the day, the maps themselves, the Guardian maps, were still kind of expensive, the invitations were super expensive, all of that. Well, invitations are they cost an Alchemy Orb and maybe a couple of Chaos or Exalts to roll up, but they're given to you by Kirak for free. So that annoying frustration is gone. In terms of the cost of the maps, they are very cheap to run. They are anywhere from about 5 to 8 Chaos, but as I could show you off here, I pulled out this Scarab right here, Influencing Scarab of Conversion. This makes it so that it is unbelievably easy to farm up a ton of any of these type of maps. You can do any of the map farming strategies. We've put out a lot of videos on those in this channel. Basically, you could just run like a back to basics tier 16 map setup with some cartography scarabs, maybe one cartography scarab of duplication, and then an influencing scarab of conversion. Or I guess you could do I think my preferred method would be one regular Carto, one Carto of duplication, one hunted traders just to have a bunch more guys to kill and get maps from, and then one influencing Scarab of conversion. Basically the exact same strategy that I use for farming corrupted 8 mod maps, except instead of farming corrupted 8 mod maps, we're farming Guardian maps. You could do 20 minutes of this and have enough Guardian maps to farm for a couple of hours. So in terms of what this strategy creates, we're doing a combination of different things. We're doing Deli Mirror, so on the one hand, it just creates a bunch of random crap. You'll get Divine Orbs, you'll get Scarabs, you'll get Cluster Jewels for sure, but then you'll just get tons and tons of other stuff. Random currency, unique maps, random tier 16 maps, just lots and lots and lots of stuff. You also do get simulacrums and simulacrum splinters, and although those are kind of like the Maven's Writs and a lot of the fragments from the bosses, those are valued very low individually in tools like Wealthy Exile, crazy low. If we look at Wealthy Exile here, the value on these fragments of constriction is 25 Chaos, right? Super duper low. In bulk, all of these are worth a lot. Simulacrums in Wealthy Exile are valued at about 85 Chaos, which is a little over half of a divine. But in practice, if you have 5 simulacrums, 10 simulacrums, you could probably sell them for closer to a full divine each. And because you are farming these up pretty quickly, that is really a disparity where it actually adds up pretty quickly. Now, there is some other stuff in Wealthy Exile where it's maybe overvaluing some of the cluster jewels that you might just not even want to bother to sell. Might be a little bit tedious to sell some of these things. So I wasn't really that worried about sitting here and perfectly balancing out all the books. I think the better strategy really is to just farm super fast, get a ton of stuff, and then sell the stuff that is valuable for as much as you can get for it. Again, things like the Maven's Writs are worth 1 divine each in bulk. They're listed as 90 chaos in Wealthy Exile because there are a handful of people. If we look at Maven's Writs here, handful of people that have them listed for 90 chaos. But then if we look at, like, let's say we're looking for 10 of them at a time, you know, over a divine each. There's also a lot of tier 17 maps coming in. As you can see, I got 4 in the Sirus setup, 5 in the Shaper setup, and 4 in farming 4 Elder sets. You do get a lot of maps in the strategy, so you get a lot of tier 17s, you get a lot of Maven's Writs, a lot of the non-Uber boss fragments, and that really is what this strategy kind of does, as it's like consistent moneymaker. Its stable moneymaker is the non-Uber boss fragments that are still valuable to some people. People do still buy them, not for a ton, but you're able to farm a lot of them, and then they are worth quite a bit more in bulk. So in terms of like what you do, you basically step into the Delirium Mirror, run to the end of the map, killing everything along the way, but run to the end of the map as fast as you possibly can, blast the boss's brains in half, loot everything, make sure you turn off Delirium. That's important. You do want to keybind that somewhere, and you kind of want to keybind it somewhere that's not the same keybind as your portal keybind. I swapped my keybinds around this league, and so there were maybe like 3 or 4 maps, 2 or 3 maps in the span of doing this, so like 50 or so times, where I accidentally turned off Delirium instead of opening a portal in the boss room. Whoopsie. All right, so in terms of my initial plan, my goal was to do basically 5 rotations of each boss. I set up a dump tab for Sirus and Shaper, and then I was kind of looking around and realized, like, oh, I guess all of my big dump tabs, all of my quad tabs are wasted on the awesome league mechanic. So I just set up like a little one for Elder, and I said, you know, I think I'll do like 3 for Elder. I've always found Elder, at least for me, to be a little bit more annoying because it's actually not slower than Shaper. I was surprised to remember that and find that out again, but testing definitely proved it out. Elder's actually faster than Shaper in my experience, but you literally just stand there and wait for the Elder to like suck up the dudes, and that actually was like kind of annoying, even though, again, not actually slower. So I found Sirus, of the 3 Guardian sets, to be by far the most fun. I didn't really find there to be any price difference in the maps on Sirus. I mean, I've self-farmed all the maps anyway, but there isn't really a significant price difference between any of the 3. The bigger difference really is just that the Sirus fragments and the Shaper fragments are worth substantially less than the Elder fragments. Elder fragments are worth about 1.4 divines, 1.5 divines each in bulk. Obviously, prices will vary, your mileage will vary, but Elder fragments are worth a lot more in bulk because the Elder actually gives some valuable, you know, he gives 2 Mod Watcher's Eyes, though, because those could still be valuable, whereas regular Shaper, regular Sirus, not usually that valuable of bosses to really farm all that often, or, you know, tons and tons of times. So ultimately, I wound up doing, as I said, 5 Sirus sets, 5 Shaper sets, and then 3 Elder sets. I did all of those yesterday, and then today, when I finally got a chance to like sit down and play a bit, I said, you know, I think just to kind of do a little sanity test, make sure my numbers are right on the amount of time I was spending doing these, I'll do another couple Shaper or Sirus sets. I'll do like another Elder set. So I folded those in here. And so I did, in the span of 4 Elder sets, I made about 15 divines. That's about 16 maps. And I did find that it took about 9 or so, somewhere in the range of like 8 to 10 minutes, depending on how good or bad the maps were. And honestly, in the invitation, whether the Eradicator was one of the first 2 bosses to spawn. If the Eradicator is one of the first 2 bosses to spawn, you can nuke it down and potentially kill it before it's even able to do its annoying immunity phase. If not, then that will make the Maven fight take about 15 seconds longer as you're waiting for the stupid Eradicator to sort of fly around and be immune to damage. Very annoying monster. Very, very annoying. Now, I found that Elder was pretty profitable, as you could see, over 20 divines an hour, even with sort of the, I guess you could call it conservative time of like 9 minutes for a set. If we really wanted to be super, super, super conservative, maybe more like 10 minutes a set, still over 20 divines an hour, and that is with the deflated value on all of the stuff that you would sell in bulk, according to Wealthy Exile. So I actually think this is probably closer to 25, or maybe pushing into 30 divines an hour if you're really able to be super fast with this, or if you are specifically farming, like you're using all of the scarabs that I mentioned to farm up boss maps, but then you're also using, like, you know, this would definitely mean you get less, but if you target a map that you really like that's like super fast, like dunes or something, and then you were to take singular focus, so you only got guardian maps on dunes. Again, I don't really think that's a great strategy, but it's something you could do to like very specifically make sure you're weeding out some of the crappy slow maps. Like, I'm sure I have a maze map, the perfect maze map, very slow, kind of terrible. I did some, I added that in to kind of make it seem a little bit more average, you know, but like if you completely excise all of the maze maps, all of the like super long maps like port or shipyard or whatever, and you're only running super fast maps, then I think you can really cut this down. You could maybe even get these down to more like 6 or 7 minutes of full set if you're insanely fast, but I'm trying to be like a little bit more human. And, you know, I think, as I said, I think about 9 minutes a set for the Elder was pretty realistic. I think about 10 minutes a set was realistic for the Shaper, and that's because of the Guardian of the Chimera. He's just slow. There's just not really anything you can do about it. He's just slow. And there isn't really anything that's all that super valuable coming out of the Shaper sets either. Like the Shaper fragment sets really aren't that valuable. There isn't a div card of any value that's dropped by any of the Shaper Guardians, unlike the Elder Guardians who drop, what is it called? Eldritch Decay. I might not have any of those. Yeah, I don't have any of those on this character. Maybe I do. Decay. Yeah, here we go. Uber Elder Fragments from the Eldritch Decay. This is actually a pretty useful div card, and that does come from Elder sets, so that's pretty good. And then Sirus sets drop a Fate Worse Than Death, which gives you a Cortex, which, again, not insanely valuable, but like it's a bit of extra icing on the cake for both Elder and Sirus that just isn't present for Shaper. And then I found Sirus to be by far the most fun. I think the boss fights are a lot more fun than the Shaper boss fights. I mean, I think 3 of the 4 Shaper boss fights are great. It's really just the Guardian of the Chimera that is just so long and slow. He's like, you know, a full minute and a half slower than the other 3 bosses. You can clear the other bosses in like 80 seconds, 70 seconds to do the whole map. Then the Chimera, you're going to be in there for over 3 minutes every time, it feels like. And that's pretty annoying, ultimately, considering that there isn't like any super high appeal for actually doing the Shaper sets. So I definitely think they are like a cut below the other 2. Definitely the worst of the 3. And then Sirus was my favorite. Sirus is just... First of all, I think the bosses, as I said, are better. I think that they are faster in general. You also are getting, I mean, not that doing Atlas sets is valuable really, but you do occasionally get 10 bosses and do an Atlas set, and that'll sometimes give you a little bit of currency. Generally, I don't really think it's all that great. But I think, you know, you more get some value out of actually killing the map bosses. Like, you will just get some random nice drops out of the map bosses. And I think on that note, we should probably talk about the setup. And that means the Scarabs first. And so what we're doing here, as I said, is we're doing Delirium Mirrors. We are casting a wide net. So for that, I like to use 2 of these right here, Delirium Scarabs of Paranoia. These are 1 chaos in bulk. Super duper cheap. And what they do is they make it so that between the 2 of them, you get 4 additional reward types on your Delirium encounters. That just means you're going to get a lot more random stuff from the Deliriums, and that means a lot more Delirium Orbs. If we look at this, look at how many Delirium Orbs I got in. This is like 28 maps. I got just an absolutely crazy amount of Delirium Orbs. You're getting several Delirium Orbs per map if we actually look at this in Wealthy Exile. Orb, well, let's say Delirium, there we go. This is from what is this, 16 maps. I pulled like quite a few Delirium Orbs, like a couple divines worth of Delirium Orbs from 16 maps in the Elder, from 20 Shaper maps. This is, you know, dozens of Delirium Orbs, and then from 28 maps, again, dozens of Delirium Orbs. Now, something that you can do with Delirium Orbs is, like, you could take some of these low-value ones, like Armor Smith's Delirium Orbs. You can come over to the Hoarder Crafting Station, use Blue Life Force. It's only 30 Blue Life Force per orb, and you can just re-roll the type of them. There are a couple of types of Delirium Orbs that really stand out. If we pull up PoE Ninja here, Delirium Orbs, there's really like 3 that stand out. Skittering are far and away the most valuable. These can sell for a lot of chaos, and they'll actually move as well, or divines, whatever. And then diviners, you know, giving divination cards, and then finally fine orbs giving currency, and then all the rest of the Delirium Orbs are pretty low value. So it's 30 blue life force to reroll each orb, and 30 blue life force is less than 1 chaos. I think I just bought a ton of life force. As you can see, I bought like 30,000 ish, 27,000 life force, and I was paying something like 1 chaos for every 75 life force. So we're talking about less than half a chaos to roll each one of these Deli Orbs. I think that's pretty good. Now that doesn't end it for us for Scarabs. We're also taking Delirium Scarab of Mania. I'm only using one of these. It makes it so that your Deli reward meters fill 100% faster. This is really good if you're doing like a super heavy Deli strategy where you're really trying to juice the Delirium Mirror as hard as you possibly can and get a massive amount of, you know, like get a full simulacrum out of every map, basically. The thing is that we're kind of zooming through. We're really not trying to kill every single monster in the entire map. We're just kind of trying to blast through, just make a straight line to the boss and kill whatever's in the way and just zoom. And so I think that this is okay for getting, you know, basically somewhere in the range of like 5 to 7 ticks on all of our rewards, but not necessarily like, we're not trying to kill everything. We're not trying to push to the max. And then finally, I'm using these Cartography Scarabs of Singularity. This is something that I kind of poo-pooed earlier in the league when I was talking about some map farming strategies, and I got some good feedback, and so I kind of revisited these, and I gotta say they're actually pretty good. They make it so that every map boss in the map, and because we're doing Maven, we're getting multiple bites at map bosses, every single one of them will drop a unique map. This is not necessarily all that valuable on its own. A lot of unique maps won't make it past the filter. A lot of them just aren't very valuable, but they have a chance to convert into tier 17s, and so because of that, as you can see, we got actually a pretty good haul of tier 17s. I mean, in the Elder sets, I was getting a tier 17 map every 4th map, and considering that I'm blasting through these maps in 2 minutes on average, like that's pretty good, you know, getting probably 6-7 tier 17 maps an hour if we're really like zooming with decent luck. I think that's pretty good, and it really adds just a lot of extra value onto the strategy for very cheap. Again, this is a 1 chaos scarab. All of these are 1 chaos scarabs. All right, as I was finishing up editing and all that, I noticed I skipped over one thing, and I wanted to come back and just make sure that this explanation is here so the question doesn't even get asked. Using Delirium Scarab of Neurosis is, in my mind, actively harmful. I did play around with it a bit, and I think that basically what it'll do is it'll add both of the unique Delirium bosses into the map, and that's cool if you're doing like a super heavy juicing Delirium strategy. I think that makes perfect sense. However, we're not doing that. We're trying to zip to the boss as fast as we can. So this is just going to make it slower, and I don't think it's going to add anywhere close to enough value into each map to justify the guaranteed slowdown from having to stop and kill those Deli bosses. You know, or you're skipping them, and then what are you even doing with this Scarab? So I wouldn't use these at all. All right, now let's take a look at the Atlas passive tree. So what we're doing here is we're coming right up the gut, and we're getting all of the map mod effect nodes that we can that are like big ones. They're not super important. We're not taking quant, we're not taking map mod effect, and that's because most of the stuff that we're farming here doesn't really scale that much with quant, doesn't scale that hard with quant. We're not pushing super hard for Delirium. You'll note that we are not taking Descent into Madness, and this is crucial. This is actually very important to not take Unending Nightmare, because Unending Nightmare will completely break this. You are not trying to turn this into permanent Delirium. You are specifically trying to farm Delirium Orbs and to some extent Delirium Splinters or Simulacrum Splinters and Simulacra. So Descent into Madness would result in more orbs and more splinters and fragments or simulacrums. But it also makes things significantly harder to the point that it does actually add more time onto all of your maps. I did play around with this, and I felt that it was adding anywhere from like 10 to 30 seconds per map, depending on what map you're running. For Shaper sets in particular, Descent into Madness really made Chimera a much longer, slower, harder boss. And so I don't recommend running this. I would basically, under any circumstances, maybe if you are running an absolutely insane juice build, then sure. But I wouldn't. This is really like, this is a strategy that I played around with doing both Forbidden Rite Pathfinder and Toxic Rain Pathfinder. And I even played around with, as you could see, I even played around with using Mage Blood, which I don't necessarily recommend. Like, as you can see, I don't have 100% uptime on Progenesis, and I am actually using Progenesis to cap my Chaos Res. So I don't really think that this is like, I'm not saying that this is good. I just found it to be like slightly faster. And, you know, if I'm trying to like see, does this work? It sort of worked. I didn't think that it actually wound up being a meaningful increase in the amount of maps that I could do per hour, but it was something I wanted to play around with and test. And as you can see, like, all right, let's just show me off running around just a little bit more. Zippity zoom in here. Pretty good. I think a Mage Blood build is not required, definitely, but it's pretty nice for this strategy. But I have to say, the Forbidden Rite Pathfinder was actually way faster at this than I had anticipated. I was still able to do Sirus sets in about 8 minutes, 8.5 with the Forbidden Rite Pathfinder, and with the Toxic Rain Pathfinder when I was using Tides of Time. When I switched over to Mage Blood, I got to the bosses faster, but then I had to spend more time like dodging and kind of focusing on staying alive. I couldn't just face tank as much stuff. So I actually found it to be a little underwhelming, maybe like not a wash. I think that Mage Blood definitely, well, you know, it makes you faster, but it didn't do, you know, it didn't shave like a minute off of every map, right? I thought it was gonna shave like a ton of time, and it maybe shaved like 10 seconds. Not nothing, but not the insane amount of speed that I was hoping for, which is okay. Like that's good. That means that this strategy can actually be done super effectively without requiring a Mage Blood, and that's always a good thing. Now, as for the rest of the Atlas passives here, I do still take the Necropolis nodes. I like to go along the left side just so that the haunted modifiers are a little less dangerous, specifically in this strategy, since we're really focused on zooming. And, you know, if you go along the right side and you make the haunted modifiers more powerful, you will get more all flames and more corpses. That's good normally, but in this case, it does mean more stopping to actually look at stuff, and that's maybe not as great. We're also taking the map clusters just to get more maps. We really like shaping the world since we're doing Maven. We kind of want to take everything that makes map bosses drop stuff. So chittering champions to get more scarabs, conquered conquerors, remnants of the past, vivid memories. All of this is just more stuff that can drop off of the bosses, potentially more, you know, more guardian boss maps for us to be able to run, kind of self-sustain. That's nice. We're definitely taking Imagined Pursuits. Now, because we are fighting several bosses, and because the game kind of likes to throw in some like rogue exiles, a lot of unique monsters in this particular league, I took Paranoid Fixation. I don't really know how many Delirium Orbs it actually added, probably like a couple throughout the whole span of things, but you know, I thought it was all right. Again, Screaming Whispers, not necessarily a super valuable thing. Like, we're not getting a ton of Simulacrum Splinters since we are zooming to the end. I don't really think there are other Atlas passives available that would be better than just getting a bit more Simulacrum Splinters. And then of course we're taking this right here, that which you seek, Delirium Wheel, and then we're also taking 4 blocker nodes. And the reason for that is we have 84% chance to contain a Mirror of Delirium with the passives that we have, and then 8% baseline, and then these 4 blocker nodes give another 2% each, so that puts us at 84, 92, 100%. Now you can also just take this little node right here, Delirium Chance, and then not block any of these, but by blocking these, we don't get any of these relatively low value Scarabs in our maps, and that's a good thing. I don't really care about blocking the content or not. If I see like a ritual, if I see a blight, I'm gonna run past it. Maybe I'll accidentally click the blight. That did happen in a map or two. I'm not gonna stop and do it. I'm not stopping and doing anything except maybe looting some chaos orbs, that kind of thing along the way. Other than that, I'm zipping to the boss as fast as I can. Destructive play may summon up to like 3 bosses. Usually it's 1 or 2. That's okay, that's not a problem. We're still getting a lot of extra stuff off of all of the bosses, thanks to all of these things like Chittering Champions, Conquered Conquerors, Remnants of the Past, and Significant Trove, Shaping the World. All of that stuff is still making us get a lot of extra rewards from killing all of the bosses that are being given to us by the Maven. As for the final bit of setup, for the map device, I really considered doing Delirium Mirror on the map device and then like freeing up some points to go invest somewhere else, but I just couldn't find a better spot to invest them. I just really didn't think there was anywhere better. And the cost of Delirium on the map device is like 7 chaos. So if we added 7 chaos into this strategy, let me just pull up my currency here. Like if we added 7 chaos into this, look at the price, like the profit per hour go down. That's tough. You know, that's about a full divine an hour if we're really zooming, maybe more. Like we're keeping costs super low. That's the goal here, right? Really super low, super efficient farming. That's really just all about speed. That is sort of the requirement. There's like 2 things here. One, the annoyance of doing Maven and Delirium Mirror if you don't like those, which I actually do, but you know, whatever. The annoyance of bulk selling, those are like the 2 big sort of pieces of friction that keep this a profitable strategy. And then the positive is that it's super cheap. It's super efficient, and it's really quite easy once you get the hang of it, and I definitely have the hang of it. I've definitely really enjoyed this. I think it is a great like spiritual successor to the farm strategy I came up with in the last league that I was really happy with. It's not making 50 divines an hour this league because that was a super insane inflation league, and this is the exact opposite, but it's about halfway there, maybe a little further than halfway there actually, and that's really good. All right, so the last little bit of stuff I kind of want to close on here is just to talk about some of the bosses. I think each of the bosses are relatively easy for the most part. I don't think any of them are all that challenging once you're this deep in a league, especially if you are ready to speed farm them, then they really shouldn't be posing a lot of threat. But in the invitations, I do think it is important to prioritize the sort of the main danger boss, the kind of sniper in each boss fight. And so in Sirus, that is definitely Baran. He can off-screen snipe you. He likes to blink right over to you and do a smash. So Baran is always my prio target in the Sirus invitations. In the Shaper invitations, that's the Hydra. She basically does the exact same thing. She will off-screen snipe you. She will dash toward you and hit you with a barrage, and so you just really want to burn her down as fast as you can as well. And then in the Elder fights, it's a little different. The Eradicator definitely can also like blast you from off screen with the overhead lightning strikes that he does, or whatever thunder bolts that like blast on top of your head. Those can be pretty dangerous, but really I like to focus the Eradicator, get him off the map because he likes to go immune for long periods of time, and that's super duper annoying. It's something that the Hydra also does. She will like leave the encounter area and put some like area denial turrets on the ground. And so for the same reason, I like to focus her out. Baran in the Sirus invitations won't do any sort of like leaving the arena. Thankfully, he doesn't have any immunity, but he does like to blanket the ground in the very irritating runes. And so that was another thing that I really like to focus on, just getting him out of there. I have to say I was really pleased with how Forbidden Right did in this farm strategy. I mean, for one, because of how much like life regen and energy shield regen, it's using Eldritch Battery instead of a mana pool, basically. Because of how much regen it has, it's able to just totally face tank all of those Baran runes on the ground that siphon your mana. It's able to face tank Baran just in general. It's able to face tank everything, you know. Again, that's a build that like could face tank tier 17s and uber bosses, so these delirious tier 16 bosses are just child's play for it, and that's great. It really was pleased by how zoomy it felt. It was a lot faster than I had expected it would be, and I was very pleased by that in the end. Another tip here that I would like to give is just simply like, when should you empty your inventory? And you don't want to wait until it's completely full, because then that means you're zoning out to empty your inventory and then jumping back in and then zoning back out. You definitely don't want to have that ever occur. But I do think a good strategy is basically every 4 maps and an invitation set. That's about enough to get your inventory fairly close. And so the approach I was taking was, except for the times where I would forget and kind of clear my inventory in between maps, which I will say, mistake on my part. But generally speaking, I would set up several sets in my bags, and, you know, I'd set up like throw in 20 Scarabs and then pull out like 4 or 5 sets of maps to go ahead and run, have them all oriented in my bags, and have them all oriented in the same way. So just to like give an example here, let's just pull out like four sets of Sirus maps here just to kind of show off. So I would have them all oriented in the same way here. so that I'm going to do them all in the same order every time, and so that I never like get confused and accidentally put the wrong map in or anything like that. And so, you know, I would just run through these like this, you know, slap Veritania in, go, and then as that's like loading up, go ahead and slap Hell Has Been in before I actually jump into the next map, and then run through that map, do it, finish it, start the next map, slap in the Baran map, again, run it all, and then once I'd finished all of those and done the invitation, then clear down all of my inventory into whatever my dump tab is, and then jump into the next set of maps, and then repeat that until I had finished out basically a full set of Scarabs, and then then kind of stop and evaluate everything, or maybe take a little break, or set up for another set. All right, it's been really fun kind of coming back to this strategy and trying to tweak it and make it work with the current state of the end game. I'm really happy with it. I think that given how much changed about the end game, this still really captures a lot of the feel and a lot of the stuff that I loved from that old version of doing this sort of Deli Mirror, Maven boss rushing, super zoomy strategy. Really found it to be a lot of fun, just a very fun flow to it. And I think, you know, once I get all of this video done and uploaded, I think I'm probably going to do some more of it. I definitely am going to spend some time re-rolling all of the Deli Orbs to like one of these 3 sets and bulk selling those off. But I'm probably going to do even more of this farming because, as I said, I've really had a lot of fun doing it. All right, that's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye.